For the first time in what seems like years, the Buccaneers have something to genuinely look forward to, and they believe they are legitimate contenders. They had the right to be excited when they drafted a quarterback number 1 overall 5 years ago in Jameis Winston, don't get me wrong, but they, along with everyone else, knew if he were going to bring them a Super Bowl, it would be at minimum a few seasons. But in 2020, it is a completely different situation than it was 5 years ago, as then they were bringing in a Heisman winner and a national champion, unproven at the next level. Now they are bringing in the opposite of that, in a 6-time Super Bowl champion, a 4-time Super Bowl MVP, and a 3-time regular season MVP in Tom Brady. Brady is often referred to as the GOAT, and because of this acquisition alone, there's been a lot of speculation this offseason as to how the NFC, and more importantly for today's video, how the NFC South plays out in 2020. But before we get started, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now let's begin. We're starting the video off by saying this. No disrespect to Tom's accomplishments in the past 6 years, as in that time span he has 3 Super Bowl titles, an MVP, and really cemented himself as the greatest of all time. However, the quarterbacks in his division during that time period have went by the names of E.J. Manuel, Tyrod Taylor, a young Josh Allen who is nowhere close to the player he'll be at his peak, Geno Smith, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Josh McCown, and you get the point. Tom has dominated January, don't get me wrong, but he's had an easier path to get there than most. And let's be honest here, the quarterbacks aside from Josh Allen and Tyrod for a season weren't the best. Fitzpatrick has games here and there, but to even try and compare him to the NFC South quarterbacks Matt Ryan, Drew Brees, and formerly Cam Newton have dealt with in their division the past decade is asinine. It is proven Brady has for quite some time played with weak quarterbacks in his division. That doesn't take away from his accomplishments, don't get me wrong, but it should be noted heading into the 2020 season that will play a bigger role than people think of how the division plays out. Now, I'm not saying in the past few years Tom has taken games off, because he certainly hasn't, but there have been games in the past few years where he certainly hasn't had to exert as much effort or take a few more hits because the Patriots have been up by so much, and quite frankly that won't happen in 2020, and if it does, it will be few and far between. The Patriots had 4 of their first 7 games in 2019 be separated by 26 or more points, and in games like that, anyone, whether it be punter Tressway playing Madden, or Tom Brady, or any viewer watching this video, can hand the ball off to Sony Michel or another Patriots running back for that matter, and let the clock run and have the quarterback not take hits and stay injury free. Playing in a division like the NFC South, with quarterbacks like Matt Ryan, Drew Brees, and don't sleep on him, but Teddy Bridgewater, this won't happen in 2020 for Tom and the Bucs. Tom will take a lot more hits, and there will be a lot more wear and tear on his body in 2020 than there was in 2019 before the regular season ends. And at age 43, Tom, understandably so, will be doing everything he can to stay healthy and to take as few hits as he can. Now, having established that, we look at what to expect for the rest of the NFC South this upcoming season. The Bucs in 2019 gave up an absurd 449 points, and a lot of that, but not all of it to be completely clear, can be attributed to 41 turnovers, 30 of which were interceptions from Jameis Winston. I'm going out on a limb here and saying Tom Brady will throw less than 30 interceptions in 2020, and that alone should save the Bucs a lot of points, with a combination of short fields for opposing offenses, less pick sixes thrown overall, and how many red zone turnovers they had last year. The Bucs had 4 losses last year be decided by a touchdown or less, and having Tom Brady at quarterback versus Jameis will certainly impact that. And had those games been wins for the Bucs, we're looking at an 11-5 Bucs team in 2019 instead of a 7-9 Bucs team in 2019. Now on to the Panthers. They gave up by far a league-high 31 rushing touchdowns in 2019, and the selection of defensive tackle Derek Brown at number 7 overall can be directly attributed to this. While their quarterback play should improve with Teddy Bridgewater under center in place of Kyle Allen, and as much as I love Teddy as a former Vikings fan, let's be honest here about the Panthers' 2020 season. A new head coach is trying to install a system and get his players acclimated to his system, combined with playing 2 lock-in Hall of Fame quarterbacks in the same division, and potentially a third in Matt Ryan. They aren't winning the NFC South this year unless the other 3 quarterbacks get injured. No disrespect to them, as their defense looks great for the future with players like the aforementioned Brown, Brian Burns, and Yetur Gross-Matos, but the Panthers are not winning the NFC South in 2020. That's not to say they won't be competitive, because they will, but to expect them to go into New Orleans, Tampa, and Atlanta and pull out wins, to me, isn't happening. They went 1-5 in the division last year, and there was a reason they selected in the top 10 in the draft. They have a promising future with players like Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and the defensive players I mentioned, but simply put, 2020 isn't going to be their year. Now on to the Falcons, who finished the year 6-2 and saved head coach Dan Quinn's job after a tumultuous 1-7 start. During their final 8 games, they managed to beat New Orleans, San Francisco, and Tampa all on the road. And during those final 7 games, the Falcons were 5-2, and Matt Ryan threw for over 300 yards 5 times. The Falcons signed home state hero this offseason in running back Todd Gurley, as in his college days back at Georgia, he ran for over 3,200 yards and had 36 rushing touchdowns. Gurley's production didn't stop there either, as he became a 3-time Pro Bowler for the Rams and a 2-time first-team All-Pro. He started his NFL career off with 4 straight 1,200 total yard seasons, only for injuries to catch up to him in 2019 and ultimately leading to his release from the Rams. Expecting Gurley to revert back to the player he was pre-injury is a little tall of a task at this point in time, but behind a Falcons offensive line that should be solid in 2020 with players like Jake Matthews, Chris Lindstrom, and Caleb McGarry on it, there's no reason Gurley can't have 1,000 rushing yards, that is, if he's given enough volume to get there. Now on what to expect from the rest of the team, Matt Ryan can be penciled in for another 4,000 yard year, and something to watch is in 2016, he threw for 38 touchdowns, in 2018 he threw for 35 touchdowns. Given the even year we're in, 2020, he would be in line to have a huge year, but more than likely that's coincidental for those 2 outlier years. Julio Jones can also be penciled in for over 1,000 yards, as the Hall of Fame wide receiver can be expected to have that again for what would be the 7th straight season and 8th time in his career to hit the 1,000 yard mark. Schedule-wise and record-wise, I think the Falcons' floor is 7 wins, and I think their ceiling is around the 10 to 11 win mark. With the 7 seed playoffs, they should be able to get in with players like Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and hopefully a revamped Todd Gurley leading the way. I don't think they are Super Bowl contenders or that they'll win the division, but a playoff spot in the 7 seed tournament is realistic for this team. The Saints are 3-time defending division champions, and during that time period, Michael Thomas has caught 378 passes for over 4,300 yards and 23 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara during that time period has accumulated over 4,400 total yards and 37 touchdowns in his own rights, and those two, along with Hall of Fame quarterback Drew Brees, are a big reason in the past 48 regular season games, 3 full seasons to be exact, the Saints have went 37-11. Unfortunately for Brees and company, they haven't put it all together, and their only Super Bowl during the decade-and-a-half run with him under center came back in 2009 when they beat the Colts in Super Bowl 44. With Brees playing this season at age 41, the window to win a second Super Bowl with him is closing. There's no denying that either. And for 2020 specifically, they will have trouble getting there, due in large part to teams like the 49ers, the Vikings, who seem to be their nemesis in the playoffs, and potentially the Bucs. Their roster is good enough to get them into the big dance. There's no doubt about that, but it's about surviving and advancing once a team is in the playoffs. The Saints have had very tough luck the past few seasons in the playoffs, and if they are to win a second Super Bowl with Drew, this has to be the year. Now, predicting this team's record and how they do when they get to the postseason, because let's face it, the Saints are getting to the postseason in 2020 unless Brees, Winston, and Taysom Hill all get injured. The floor for this team is, in my opinion, 11 wins, and they will lose a game somewhere as they have to play at Tampa, at Atlanta, the 49ers, the Chiefs, and the Vikings, so they will lose at least one game, but there's no reason they can't get the 1 seed with this roster. Getting the 1 seed with a 41-year-old quarterback to give Drew extra rest is much more substantial to them than a team like the Chiefs or Ravens, whose quarterbacks are both 25 or younger. If they get the 1 seed and hopefully for their sake a 7 seed upsets a 2 or a 6 seed upsets a 3, they could be looking at an easier trip to the NFC Championship game. I did a prediction on a way too early Super Bowl 55 matchup video a few weeks ago, and they were my pick for the NFC. The Saints' floor is very high, and understandably so, as their team is absolutely loaded with talent from top to bottom. Now, addressing all teams' records, I think it plays out something like this. The Saints finishing at 12-4, the Bucs at 10-6, the Falcons at 9-7, and the Panthers around the 6-10 or 7-9 area. 3 teams from this division could make the playoffs in a 7-seed format. While I do think Brady's addition to Tampa will make them better, the fact of the matter is the rest of the conference is insanely loaded compared to the AFC, as there's legitimate contenders in every division, and that's something Brady hasn't had to deal with the past few years. I would be extremely surprised if the Bucs host a home Super Bowl, but if if they do and Brady wins it, then he has to ride off into the sunset, because it truly would not get better than that or have a better ending to a storybook career. And that's all I have for today's video. I hope you're enjoyed, and if you're still watching, I appreciate the time out of your day. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day. Let's go Vikes, Chucky.